Ekabo and welcome to the Ifa Orisa Tradition Discussion Program. And I would like to open with an Oriki today from Ijuba. Biababo Oju, Biababo Imu, Isale Agbon Eni Apariri, Ada Fun Oromila, Enigbati O en Lo, Boa Ashelo Wo Oludumare, Orubo Oludumare, Siwafi Ashe Fun, Enigbati Bogbo Aye, Bo Po Oti, Bo Ashe Lowo Oludumare, and one si and one to Bogbo Eyeti, O we si and she, Lati Igbani Wani, A and we pay Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. All right, so today's topic is going to be a very interesting topic. Some may not consider this topic to be an Ifa subject, but in Trinidad, this has become an integral part of the practice of our tradition. It has been a part of the practice here for a very, very long time. And that is the reason why I'm going to speak on the topic. The topic today is going to be Sadaka, also called Sara, also called Saraka, also called Salaka. All right, in Trinidad, as well as in several of the other islands, this celebration is also referred to as Big Drum by some in Carriacou and also Petit Martinique, and some also call it Nation Dance. All right, but we're going to get into that. Before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about the traditional practitioners of the Orisa tradition in Trinidad. Many of our ancestors here in Trinidad, in particular, came from various parts of Africa, West Africa. Some, a limited amount, came directly via slave ships. And I don't think it's very many, right? And there's historical evidence to prove the claim that I'm making. In Trinidad, we've had several censuses during those times that would show that we had persons coming into Trinidad, not just from Nigeria, but from other parts of Africa also. All right, we've also had many different groups, not just the Yoruba or Yaraba as they were called, but we also had persons from the Mandingo people, from the Igbo people, from the Cromanti or Koromanti people. We've also had crewmen. We've had people from the Congo also. Many of these persons, again, did not come directly from Africa. Many of them came from different parts of the world. And eventually were brought here. A good example of this would be many of the persons who were brought from South Carolina to Trinidad. Then there would have been those who came via Texas. There would have been those who came via California. There were those who would have came via Florida to Trinidad and to other parts of the Caribbean, particularly during the time when France played a critical role in the development of agriculture in the region. All right? Particularly as it relates to Saint Domingue, or what we call Haiti or the Dominican Republic today. Many of the persons who came from the French-speaking Caribbean, many of them were transshipped from Haiti, and some of them would have come from other countries in North and South America and made their way to Haiti, whether they were shipped there or whether they went there voluntarily. The reason I'm talking about this is because Haiti seemed to have played more of an important role in the development of the Caribbean, and as well as enriching many of the colonial powers. At one point in the history, Saint Domingue was one of the wealthiest and largest sugarcane producers, which created a lot of income for a lot of the colonial powers. And after the revolution, that changed things tremendously and would have caused large amounts of persons to migrate from Saint Domingue, which it was called at the time, and later on, many of them would have migrated to the French-speaking islands in the Caribbean. For the case of Trinidad, during the settler population or the settler experiment would have had a huge number of French-speaking migrants coming from the French-speaking Caribbean, many of whom would have at some point in the past been also in Haiti. All right? With that in mind, I'm going to read something that I got from one of the books by Dr. Maureen Warner Lewis. All right? In one of her books, in the book that spoke about the Trinidad Yoruba, she mentioned where in Trinidad that a great portion of Africans actually were. In this particular case, she spoke mainly about the Yoruba or Yaraba people. But I believe largely among these people would have also included other groups of Africans, maybe in smaller numbers. But she mentioned that in Tunapuna, the main block of Yoruba extended along the narrow belt between Back Street and the Eastern Main Road. She says there was a spillover into portions of Baltazar Street and Bazelon Street and El Dorado Road near the Eastern Main Road. She also said that some Yorubas were also located on Fairley Street. All right, so that there is basically, she gave an idea as to where and which parts of Tunapuna that was occupied or that was settled by Yoruba persons. She mentions Gasparillo and Carriacou. All right, she says that a stable Yoruba community was also located at St. Margaret's in Claxton Bay and northwards of St. Margaret Junction in Carriacou. She says there was a settlement known as Yoruba Wood. She says this site is today Chase and McDonald Village. She says beyond St. Mary's Junction, in Oropouche, there were two African villages. One was a Yoruba and the other were a crewman. All right, the term crewman is in reference to persons who came from Sierra Leone. Yes, the term crewman would have been in reference mainly to persons who came from Sierra Leone, many of whom were in fact what we call today mulattoes. All right, she said that one of these must have been Avocat or Bois Macaque district. All right. She says there were also Yoruba blocks in Newtown on the outskirts or the outside of Port of Spain. She says in Cocorit, Carenage, Piti Valley, St. Joseph, Aruca, Princestown, Freeport, Couva, and the 3rd and the 5th Company, all right, which is in Moruga direction. She mentions also that Valencia and Manzanilla district in North Trinidad, for soldiers recruited in Sierra Leone, there comes the same place again, that the crews that I just mentioned, from among slave captives and demobilized after the 1793 to 1815 Napoleonic Wars between France and Britain. She says from the early 1817 to October 1818 and again in 1825, these soldiers and their families were continuously settled on crown lands in the Caribbean, but in particular Trinidad. She says in 1862, she says 1/8 of the population of Trinidad was composed of discharged soldiers. All right, so I'm reading this just to give people an idea of where many of our people would have been. Okay, and these of course should in fact be really historical sites. All right, but I'm afraid that these type of things would have to be investigated by us, because the government or politicians does not have any interest in such things. All right, but let me go back to the main topic. I just wanted to read that because I thought it was something interesting and worth sharing with our community who would be following the program and the stream. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Sadaka, Sara, Saraka, and Salaka. All right, from all of the research that I have done, and this research hasn't started today, this is years and years, well into 20 years of research. The term Saraka or Sara is simply in reference to making a sacrifice. That's all that it is. All right, this practice that is common among many Nigerians is not exclusive only to the traditional societies and community. This practice is also an Islamic practice, and I'm going to read from sources when I describe what it is. All right, what I've also discovered, right, that Saraka is a wide area of sacrifice that is practiced, but there are actually different types. So when I go into what we call Carriacou, you will discover that that is also a form of sacrifice, but Carriacou is aimed specifically at trying to derive a particular outcome for women who are desirous of having offsprings. All right, but today's lesson is Saraka and not Korikoto. Alright, so I'm going to read now. This first thing that I'm going to read came from a document called Trinidad Yoruba Lexicon by Dr. Maureen Warner Lewis. And it reads, Sadaka or Sara is charity, alms. It's a ceremony of annual thanksgiving or special supplication involving the distribution of food for friends, children, and the needy. Alright? So beside it being a sacrifice, another key element of it is that it is a form of thanksgiving. So in Trinidad, you would hardly ever hear the term Saraka being used, but you would hear many persons say that they are having thanksgiving. Alright? It is related also to Sadaka and Sara. Alright? But here in Dr. Lewis's book, it mentions charity as well as alms. Alright? So moving forward now. Saraka. Alright, and now I'm going to give a definition that I got from a Nigerian source. However, it is not from a Yoruba source, but it is Nigerian. Because in Nigeria, you have many different groups who are related. Some are subgroups of other groups. The Igbos are related to the Yoruba, but they are not the Yoruba. So I'm going to read their definition of what is called Saraka, which is what they practice. It says, these were annual communal feasts sponsored by families and involving animal sacrifice, prayers and offerings to family ancestors, but not possessions. Their purpose was to placate and honor the ancestral dead as a means of ensuring material good fortune and psychic wholeness for the coming year. Alright? So now I'm going to read now an Islamic definition. Alright? No. I'm going to read a definition from another book by Dr. Warner Lewis. And this book is called Trinidad Yoruba. She says that Saraka will also held for Emancipation Day anniversaries and La Bonne Fête, alright, which is French, which took place at Easter time. Secular entertainment took the form of storytelling, games such as Ayo, and dances that featured singing and playing of percussive instruments like the drum and the beaded calabash. Alright, now the Saraka, Salaka, Sadaka was mainly celebrated and still is celebrated in Petit Martinique and Carriacou. It could be found till now being celebrated. Alright? And I'm going to read now from a book called Ifá Orisa and Religious Identity in Trinidad, Volume 2, by Diane M. Stewart. Alright, this is in chapter 4 on pages 193 to 196. Alright, where she speaks a little bit about who we know to be Chief Iyalode Shangowumi. Alright, who was the founder and the head of the Isham Shrine in Upper Santa Cruz, sorry. Alright, She says, Iya has continued the Yoruba nation's 19th century tradition of Saraka, right, which is thanksgiving and almsgiving, all right, services, complemented by a full suite of ceremonial events on the Ifa ritual calendar to her growing membership. All right. Now, Chief Oregi Ajagbe Obagunle Iyalode Shangowumi Olakitan Oshun Familayo, otherwise known as Patricia McLeod. All right. That is her little reference in the book to the practice of Saraka also being recognized and practiced by the Isam shrine. All right. Now I'm going to do some more reading. I'm going to read here from a group in Nigeria called the Lord Zion Spiritual Temple of Wari, Nigeria, where they describe what is Sadaka. All right. They said it is any form of alms giving to the poor and beggars, or to a specific set of individuals or group. Many people think Sadaka is just to meet some needs of the poor and beggars, but it is beyond that. In the spiritual context, it is to draw something good to someone's life or to send away bad omens from someone's life. All right. In Trinidad, all right, before I read the Islamic definition, I'm going to just introduce something and I'm going to get into it a little more later on, right? But there is, in fact, a Saraka annual emancipation celebration that is held in Matura, right, at the shrine of the Bedous, which is, in fact, an ancestral veneration celebration, right, and Saraka. This is normally hosted between July and August, running from the last day of July into the first day of August, right? I will get into some more a little later. But let me just give the last definition here. This here came from the Bayat ul Maqdis Foundation, which is an Islamic organization. All right. They said Sadaka in Islam, Sadaka is charity. Profoundly expresses our faith and compassion. It goes beyond mere obligation. It is a way to share our blessings and support those in need. No matter how small, every act of kindness strengthens our community and brings us closer together. All right. Now, in doing the research, of course, I looked at different people, different sources, different practices, different traditions. All right. This is an Ifa program, and we are teaching Ifa. But in order for many people to understand some aspects of Ifa that they would have never been exposed to, I make it my duty to talk about other traditions and other religions and what they do that may be similar, that might be different, that might resemble what we practice. So for those who are of the opinion, because I mentioned Islam or Christianity or Judaism or anything else, that this is not an Ifa program, my job is to help educate and inform people. This program is not only viewed on the network by persons who are Ifa devotees. There are many different people who views this stream and do not know about Ifa. So this, what I present, is an opportunity for various people to get an understanding of what is practiced in the Ifá Orisa tradition. All right, let me continue. Now in Tobago, annually they have in Pembroke an annual Saraka Ancestral Festival, which entails a parade where there is music and singing and prayers and rituals along the route of the parade. The parade goes from Todd Road, or what is known as Congo Hill, and it goes down to the community center, where they, of course, would have all the food and the cooking and the rituals and everything else there. So Saraka is also kept up in Tobago. All right. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit now about what I introduced earlier. All right. The Saraka feast is held in Carriacou annually around September. It is generally called Big Drum, Nation Dance, or Salaka. All right. Some people even talk about the maroon feeding and that aspect of it. All right. When they talk about the maroon, they also are talking about some of the indigenous people. All right. So Carriacou, as well as the island that I mentioned also, it's Carriacou and Petit Martinique. These are two islands that are part of the French-speaking Caribbean. All right. Now, the Eastern Emancipation Cultural Committee, all right, which center is Egbe Onisi, Ile Omo, Orisha, Oni Ojubo Shango, celebrates annually an ancestral as well as a Saraka celebration, through which ancestors are venerated and recognized through song, dance, drums, food, games, storytelling, etc., etc. It is recognized as a form of thanksgiving for the ancestors. All right, this is normally hosted, as I mentioned earlier, it is hosted between the time of July and August. All right. The founder of the shrine started that tradition many years ago, and it is still kept up till today annually. All right. And it is kept up at Matura, and I think the address is Minus Trace in Matura. All right. Now, I'm going to read and get now into some of the details of the Saraka. The information I'm going to provide is from Carriacou. It could be found on the Explore Carriacou and Petit Martinique page on social media. All right. There was a particular documentary, right, where members of the Fleury family of Petit Caronage in Carriacou home, where they explained most of what they do, why they do it, and how they do it. So this now would give us a view into how the Saraka is kept and celebrated in Carriacou. All right. I also looked at a couple other documentaries too coming out of Carriacou concerning Saraka. right? And the wider practice on the island of Carriacou includes paying homage to the ancestors and feeding the ancestors at the beach or at the sea or at the ocean. All right, that is something that I saw in several of the documentaries. All right, but this particular one that we're going to look at, what they are looking at mainly is what they do at their home, where they have the cooking done outside, and what they also do in preparing a Thanksgiving table inside of their home. All right. It says a pot is prepared of mixed meats, and this is done to prepare what they refer to as a parent plate. All right, which would be a plate that is prepared for the ancestors. All right, they say the parent plate, and together with various other foods, all of the foods are prepared out in the open. So they do all of these cooking outside, because this is how the tradition was given to them. They would use the tree stone fireside to prepare their meals. So there seemed to be a degree of spirituality just with maintaining things the way that our ancestors did it. All right, so that of course would introduce to some measure not just the idea of tradition, but the idea of indigenous practices. All right, now they say the food is taken to the sea first, and then a table is prepared indoor for all the parents or ancestors for the food to be placed. All right. Now, in that particular documentary, it was mentioned that even before most of the food goes onto that table inside of the house, that the table is normally blessed by a priest. Right? Of course, we know this is something that would have been introduced later, because, in the African tradition, we don't have a Catholic priest to come and bless no table. All right? But of course, because they lived in a close-knit community, they would have to some degree embrace and accept the participation of the clergy of the Catholic Church. All right? My personal experience in growing up is that whenever my grandmother had Thanksgiving and she was a spiritual Baptist, that the priest would come and pray, yes, and bless the table before 12 midday. And after he was finished his blessing, he was offered food to have on the spot as well as to take, and then the priest would leave. And after that point, there would be then the spiritual Baptist rituals. All right, it seemed that with the Saraka in Carriacou, to some extent, it would have been done in a similar style. All right, but let me continue reading. The purpose is to give thanks. A libation is performed at the home in the opening of the ritual at the home, where all the ancestors are summoned and called and remembered by name. All right, this is what was done in the Fleury's home. All right, the table, all right, was described, and everything that was laid out on the table was identified, right? They didn't give the purpose for each of them, but they were just explaining that these are the various things that they use. All right, what was first mentioned was the drinks, which included alcoholic beverages, soft drink, and water. All right, included in the alcoholic beverage would have been rum, right? And the water that was needed for libation would also be identified on the table. All right, bush tea was included on the table. All of the sacrificed animals, or all the edible material, was also presented on the table, a portion of it, right? Which included, like for the larger animals, it would have included legs and all that. And for the smaller animals, it would have included legs and parts, but they also included the liver of the animal. All right? They also had baked products like bread, sweet bread, and things of that nature. They had beans, or what we call peas in the Caribbean. They would have had various types of nuts. They would have had provisions. They would have had local fish, rice balls, eggs, local grown eggs from the household. What we call it nut cake here. They say peanut cake in Carriacou. All right. Coconut fudge, sugar cake. Right. They had pudding that was made from some of the blood of the sacrificed animals. They had peas soup, right? Or pigeon pea soup, which is something we're familiar with here too in Trinidad. They would have had various fruits, right? But one of the essential fruits that was essential, they said, would have been bananas, ripe bananas, right? They said that the food would stay for one entire day till the following morning. All right? When everything on the table were placed in trays and they were fed to the children. All right? When they were talking about the preparation of the table and the things that were on the table, they said that special attention was paid for things that were of interest to children. Would have been the sweets and the snacks. All right, now, the last thing they mentioned, or that the interviewer asked the person in the documentary, is how was the food to be brought in and placed on the table. All right, and this was explained by the patriarch of the family. What he said is that the food is brought in and placed on the table in order of seniority. He said the oldest member of the family would be the first person to go outside, collect the food, and to bring it in, and would be the first person to place food on the table. Then he said it would continue in the order of seniority. The next junior person would be the next person to place food on the table. And he says this rotation would continue until everything is placed on the table. He says when that was completed, the next thing that would take place is one of the members of the family, they didn't say this was by seniority or anything, but one of the members would pray for the blessing of the family and the household for continued prosperity and abundant harvest, etc., etc. He says after that prayer was said, then again they would go outside with the rum and the water and they would do a libation. All right? So basically, that ended that particular documentary. Right? But one of the things I wanted to point out that was mentioned here is that he said the morning after the table was set, that means it would sit there overnight. The next morning, he mentioned that the food would be placed on a tray. All right, I did a stream before, and I explained about Carriacou and the trays that was used. I also mentioned matikur and the trays that was used for matikur by the Hindus. It is the same tray that they use in Carriacou. This tray is particularly made from the wood of the silk cotton tree. All right, and when I do Carriacou, I will also talk about these same trays being used for that ritual also. All right, but it is important to know that as an important part of the rituals of our tradition here, the Indigenous Orisa tradition, is that we use these square trays that were made of silk cotton. All right. These same trays also too were floated at the ocean, but again, that's not today's lesson. We're going to talk about that when we're dealing with Carriacou. So basically, what I did tonight, I gave you some views of the practice of Sadaka, Saraka, Sara, all right, from different places, including, I gave a brief summary of what is done in Tobago, just as far as the street parade is concerned. I mentioned it also in Matura, right? And I gave details from a documentary on the Fleury family, right? So the simplest way we know it and the way we could see it and identify it practiced in Trinidad is through the form of what we call Thanksgiving. Once there is the Thanksgiving, there is an emphasis on feeding children. There is an emphasis on having the bags prepared for the children. When I was growing up, the bag used to contain homemade snacks. Today is a little bit different because of commercialism. So now Thanksgiving keepers, they would go and they would buy various snacks. When I was small, you used to get a little brown bag. And in that brown bag would have popcorn, nuts, tulum, sugar cake, fudge, sweet bread, pone, cake. So if 10 minutes pass and you get your bag started to look greasy. That's when I was growing up. We used to get the bag, we used to get things to eat while we were there. And one of the things that was part of the tradition when I was growing up is they used to give the children money. All right, I could remember me and one of my cousins, we used to try to be tricky. We used to go and join the line multiple times. And the elder would watch us. You say, but Ollie wasn't just in the line. All right, come quick still. Come quick. And he used to give us the money a second and a third time when we joined the line. But I guess that was all fun of being a child. All right, but let me go back to the Saraka and the Salaka. All right, what I'm going to do in closing off here is I'm going to talk about some of the derived benefits for hosting and having Saraka or Salaka or Thanksgiving. All right. These benefits I got, of course, from doing research. This is online information from a person by the name of Izanwani Akwabata Ijele. Okay, so for persons who want to check, that's the name of the person who provided the information. And what this person says is that Saraka, the importance of Saraka and the importance of doing sacrifice is that it provides the following benefits. 1, it makes you to be in good terms with your ancestors, your guardian angel, the gods and the goddesses of the sea and river. All right? 2, it averts early or sudden death. 3, it makes people progress. 4, it helps fight against those who are fighting you spiritually. All right? 5, it attracts good luck and open doors, blessings and favor. 6, it attracts promotion in the place of work. And 7, it opens ways for persons. It makes persons live a long life. All right? And that ends today my stream on Saraka, Salaka, Sara, and all the different names it is called. But in essence, it is simply a thanksgiving, and it is also a way of giving alms and charity. All right? I'd like to thank everyone for coming in and listening to this stream. And I would like to remind you all, you do good for yourself. You do bad for yourself. May Olodumare bless you, bless your family, bless your community, and by extension, may he bless us as a community and our nation. And I would see you next week. And I would like to say, Odabo.